Hello, my name is Dean Berden. I was asked by the family to record some of my events through my lifetime, and that's what I'm going to try to tell you today. I grew up on a farm with my parents, Eldon and Elda, and we had a dairy farm, and we worked lots of hours, but we had lots of fun doing it too. I went to a country school and enjoyed that. We only had 2 miles to go to school every day. It was not a big deal. So I'll tell you what I started out as a small child. I can remember 5, 6 years old. I was driving tractor already. I remember one time I got really mad at my dad, or he got mad at me because he wanted me to drive a tractor and back a wagon in the shed. And I was only about probably 7. If I remember, a small tractor back in a big bale wagon back in the shed. And it took me a while, but I got the hang of it. Now I can do it without thinking about it even. But anyway, it was some good experiences on the farm. A lot of lessons to be learned about cattle and about the cycle of cattle's life and compared to the human life and all that kind of stuff. And I learned a lot about a lot of things. I learned how to work the ground. I learned how the seeds grow. I learned about all kinds of stuff. I can remember the first time I run, my dad had a 40-20, and right across the road from our house was what we call the Fritz farm. And we still farm it today. And my dad showed me how to plow with this tractor. So I went over and I plowed that whole 40 acres. And that was the first time I ever did that on my own. He was across the road watching me in the barn when I was doing it. And just some memories from growing up. I mean, yes, we didn't work all the time. We had a lot of fun. We made my dad came up with an idea of making a swimming pool out of a silo. So he made a swimming pool, and all the whole community pitched in, and we had pool parties all the time that nobody else had because nobody else had a swimming pool. They didn't have such a thing as blow-up pools or anything like that. So we spent a lot of time in the dairy. The only time we had off was on a Sunday afternoon. We were going to school typically during the day, during the school year, and in the evenings we were doing chores, and in the morning we were doing chores. And we didn't know any different, so it was fine. It worked out really well for us because we didn't know any different. And we went to church on Sunday, and it was a lot of fun. Mom killed herself to make food for us, and I can always remember her dinners at right after church. She always had a chicken or a roast or something in that was really good, and we always really liked that. But anyway, in the afternoons we would have all kinds of fun, and especially when we had the swimming pool, we'd go swimming. Anyway, we had a good time when we were growing up. We had lots of people over and doing lots of things with cousins and friends and all that kind of stuff. And I learned a lot about farming. I learned a tremendous amount, and so I picked that up from my dad. And my mom was a teacher, school teacher. She taught in some country schools around here at first, and then she went on to Marlette schools and taught there the rest of her career. So I kind of picked up both sides of it. So as I was going through high school and all of that, I decided to become a school teacher. So when I graduated from high school from Marlette, I went to Western Michigan University and got a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Education. So I could teach woods, I could teach metals, I could teach auto mechanics, I could teach small engine repair, I could teach all of those. So I got a job after I graduated and taught in Marlette. And before that happened, as I was just getting to graduate, my wife and I got married. I met her. We met at Snow Roller Rink, but I actually saw her before then, and I didn't really realize it. We used to have a pool living on Bull Green Road, and my wife, at that time she was just a girl that I saw driving her horse down the road, and she had her horse, and she was riding down the road, and I waved, and she waved, and she went back, and then...
And I met Dean when I was 14 years old, and I went to the Snow Roller Rink.
I come to find out a couple of years later, I met her at the roller rink in Snover.
Pretty cute when I walked in and saw him. And he sold me my skates to try on. He helped me put my skates on.
I was working for my brother in Snover as kind of the floor manager there, and I took the money from the people and helped them get skates and all that kind of stuff.
And that night he must have asked 3 or 4 times, to ask me to skate.
Because I was a floor manager, I made sure couples come up quite often so I could skate with her.
And he asked me to skate during couples. I was real excited about meeting him, and I went home and I told my mother I met this cute boy that went to high school in Marlette. And she says, what's his name? And I said, Well, you won't know him, Mom. He's not from Sandusky. Of course, when you're that age, you don't want your parents to know anybody. So I told her his name was Dean Berden, and she says, you just ask him if this pair's names aren't Elda and Elda. I said, Elda and Elda? And I said, well, I'll ask him, Mom. I don't think you know him at all. So the next week I went roller skating again, and I asked him, and when you know,
Come to find out, her grandparents just lived a mile down the road from us, which was kind of cool. And so we met, and we started having children right away, and I was teaching school and farming, and I was farming with my dad at first, the first year, and we both figured out that that wasn't really working the way it should, so I decided to go out farming on my own. I bought my own equipment, and we had children and farmed and all of that. And then in the late 70s, the farming became very difficult because the crop prices were so low. So when that happened, I started looking at other avenues. We grew some sugar beets for a while, and in 1978 our oldest son died, and I decided at that time that we needed to do something different in the farming. I kind of quit teaching at that time, 1978, and I decided that I was going to go in farming sugar beets and stuff like that we can make a little more money out of. So I did that, and that wasn't such a great thing either because there were so many chemicals involved. I can remember back when I was helping my dad in the farm, 13, 14 years old, I would just have a pair of cut-off jeans on and a pair of tennis shoes, and that's it. All day I'd be out, and many times I'd come home because my dad was allergic to spray, so I was in charge of all the spraying of all the crops. So when I did that, we were spraying Eptam at that time on beans, and at the end the Eptam was really yellow in color, so by the end of the day I'd be yellow, and it'd be all over my skin, all over my body, and I can't imagine what it did to me. But anyway, I learned farming techniques and farming like that. But then after our son died and we went to farming with beets and stuff like that, it was the early 80s, and I knew there was something wrong because I can remember as a child, my mother used to get so mad at me because I would have blue jeans on in the spring or fall of the year. I mean, I was like 5, 6 years old, and my dad and grandpa would be plowing out behind the house. And I'd fill my pockets right full of fish worms. And I'd forget they were in there, and so after chores I'd come in and take my jeans off, and she'd put them in the washing machine, and she was not happy because there were so many fish worms in the washing machine. So I kept that in my mind about how many earthworms there were. You could pick them up by the dozen because I always wanted to go fishing. We never really had much time. We did a few times in my lifetime go fishing, but I always remembered back, all those earthworms are in the soil, just thousands, tens of thousands of them in the soil, great big ones and really little ones. And I thought to myself in the middle 80s, I thought, there's something wrong here. Like 82, 83, I started thinking, and I never heard the word organic before. I didn't know really what it was, but I knew that we couldn't go on the way we were going because the soil was becoming sterile. It was becoming so tight and so sterile, there was no earthworms. Earthworms is not a sign of fertility in the soil, but it's a sign of health in the soil. And by having the health in the soil, when you have healthy soil, you have healthy animals, you have healthy humans. So I started thinking about this, and then my wife and I started talking about different things and how to do things. And how to do it. My grandfather, when he farmed, he didn't have any chemicals. It was during World War II where they developed the nitrogen to make ammunition or gunpowder for guns, and they didn't want to they had these huge factories they were making all these munitions in, so they transferred those over into making nitrogen fertilizer and different types of fertilizer. And those weren't necessarily the best. And that's where they started using chemicals like atrazine and all these different 2,4-D. And you think about when they did it during Vietnam War, they sprayed all this Agent Orange on the foliage so they couldn't hide in the jungles. And I sprayed hundreds and hundreds of gallons of that stuff, which is not necessarily so good. So I think we need to, as a society, look at all these things to make sure we're not creating problems for ourselves in the future. But Anyway, to get back to the story, in the early 80s, I knew that there was something wrong with the soil. So we started experimenting with compost. We started experimenting with green manures, which I already knew. A green manure is something that's turned into the soil that's already green, and it decomposes and makes fertilizer for the next crop. So I was exposed to all that, so I started thinking about that. My dad, he didn't want anything to do with it. But anyway, as the middle 80s were going by, in 1985, I got a teaching job in Caro, Michigan, teaching woodshop and drafting and engineering drafting. And when I did that, it was interesting because I substituted at first, and this guy had problems in the classroom, so I went in there, and this friend of mine got me into the teaching, and he said, I want to be fully aware that there was 11 substitutes before you, and they threw every single one of them out of the classroom. So I went in there kind of prepared, and the first week of school, one kid took a punch at me, and I made him throw up by doing a move on his hand, and after that, nobody touched me because everybody says, well, Mr. Berden's got a black belt. And I said, looked at my belt, and I said, yeah, I got a black belt. But anyway, these kids left me alone, and I really enjoyed Caro teaching there, and I taught the rest of my career there. But at the same time, I was teaching, I was farming, and then in 1986, I started my own cleaning facility. I started with a small mill and a small gravity to condition the machines so you can get all the dirt, all the pods, all the chaff, everything out of there so you have just beans in a bag. So that's what I started out at. Just did it for myself at 21, 25 wheeler. And then the first thing I know, people are coming up and asking, well, will you do a few for me? Will you do a few for me? And next thing I knew, I had 25 customers right away. So we built the facility up and started doing all of that, and it was quite successful. We really enjoyed doing that. In the meantime, I was still teaching in Caro. And in 1999, I had a group of 14 valedictorians from the same class. And that group of valedictorians, obviously they're smart kids, and I thought, oh no, what am I going to do with these kids? But I didn't have a choice. That was assigned to my class because everybody was enjoying my class so much in that engineering and design and drafting class. But these kids, they finished a whole year's worth of work in 6 weeks. Whole year's worth of work. And I thought, oh boy. So we got the kids together one day in the classroom. I talked to them seriously. I said, we need to come up with a project that you guys can learn from, that you guys can get experience from. And I didn't just have those 14, I had 14 others. I had 28 kids that year. And some of these other kids were special ed kids, so-called dumb kids. Well, they're not dumb at all, they just learn a different way. And it was really interesting, as we looked at all these projects that we could look at, they decided on a solar electric car. And at that time, there was electric cars in Saginaw High School. They had one, so we took a whole group of kids over there one day and we looked at this electric car, and I drove it around inside the gym. Anyway, that's what they decided to do. So we had to get permission from the board and the principal and superintendent and all that. And nobody wanted it. They wanted to resist me all the way. So we went to the school board. I took a bunch of parents, I took a bunch of kids with me, and I said, would you be willing to approve this project? And they said, well, we'll approve it, but we won't pay for it. So I said, okay, I will furnish the money, all the money for this electric car. But in the meantime, you've got to give me a piece of paper that says I will take the material that I put into this car, take it with me. So I did. And it was very successful. It took us about 1.5 years to build this car, and we had it complete. It would go 45 miles an hour, and it would go about 25 miles. At that time, that was quite an accomplishment. But as we were looking at all the solar part of it, the charging methods and all this kind of stuff of this, the charge controller, the shutoffs, the shunts, all those things that had to be in there to do all these things, I learned a lot with that. And I put that kind of in the back of my mind because in 2001, I quit teaching, retired from teaching, I should say, and then my wife and I decided to sell the plant over here, the cleaning plant, and we built this solar electric house that's on this property right now. And it's now, this December, it'll be 18 years old, so 17 and a half thereabouts years old right now, and it's still working well with the same equipment. So that was kind of something I learned from the kids at school, through this learning process, which was kind of cool too. A couple things that I can really highlight in my teaching career at Caro is that the kids knew over the years, because we built a lot of homecoming floats, and I wouldn't be, even though I worked with basically one class, I would not allow myself to just work with one class, because it was kind of unfair, because I had all the tools, I had all the knowledge, I had everything, so I'd work with all 4 classes producing these floats. I would get them started and say, here's what you do, here's the design, here's how you do it. And so I did that a lot, and the kids come to me one year, that valedictorian class, they came to me one year and they said, we would like to build a castle inside the gym with turrets and with drawbridge and all the kinds of things that normally go with that. So we took and started building it, and then the principal would come down and say, well, we won't take the center of the door out, so you can take this big thing in the gym. I went back to the class and I said, okay, here's a problem. Here's a manufacturing problem we have to solve. How do we solve it? So then I helped them with some of the things, and they come up with some good ideas too. And then the principal, just like 2 days before we had this thing ready to go for the prom, he says, well, you got 4 hours to put this system together. That's all you've got is 4 hours to put this whole thing, because the gym classes are important. They can't do it without one day without running around the gym. But anyway, to make a long story short, we got all the materials down there, and then the principal said, you can't have these kids off the ground. I will not allow them on a step ladder. He saw how tall these things were, and he says, I don't want these kids on that stuff. Somebody's going to get hurt or killed. I said, okay. So he come down when we had this 4 hours to put it all together. We had a really big team, because there was a whole bunch of classes, kids that I'd never had in class before. Of course, there was mostly guys, so a lot of the girls come along and whatever. But anyway, we put this whole thing together, and I was standing on top of one of these 25-foot tall turrets, and the principal come down and he said, Mr. Berden, when you get down from there and get done, you come and see me. I want to talk to you. And the kids got the biggest kick out of that. They laughed and laughed and laughed. Aha, Mr. Berden, you're going to get chewed on. So when I got down from there, and we got all the stuff done, the 4 hours was used up, then I went down to the principal's office and he says, that meant you too. You weren't supposed to be on anything. And I said, well, you didn't tell me that. You just said the kids couldn't do that. You didn't tell me. And anyway, I said, if you'd like my resignation, I'll give it to you tonight if you'd like it before I leave. Oh no, we can't do that. The kids would riot. But anyway, during that prom, we had more parents and grandparents there by far than we did students. We had like 100 and some couples there, so there was a lot of kids there, but we had a lot more parents and grandparents, because they'd heard about this from the grandparents, or from the parents and the kids. They all talked about it, and it was quite a sight that night, because everybody wanted to get their picture by this drawbridge and all that, which was really fun. And then the next year we did volcano, a huge, it was like a 35-foot volcano in the center of the gym, with holes in it that you go in and out. It was kind of fun. And we did 3 or 4 of those, so that was a lot of fun as far as fun things in the school. The solar electric car, and that's what it's all about. I found in my teaching career that if you take and get the kids excited, they'll learn anything. They'll do anything. They can read really well if they found something they liked. That's what I was when I was a kid. I was really a poor reader as a kid. And my parents got me Popular Science, Popular Mechanics magazines, and I could read that in one night. But yeah, I hated reading other crap, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, then that come to my retirement from teaching. And by the way, I should go back too, when we had 4 children. My wife and I had 4 children in that process of all that time frame. And now they're all very successful, which I'm really proud of. And let's see. As soon as I retired from teaching, I kind of backed off from farming for a year, but I helped my dad, and then retirement just wasn't for me at 51 years old, so I decided that I was going to go out and go back into farming just a little bit. So I bought a small tractor and putzed around, and the first thing you know, it was kind of getting away from me, and it was got to be 300 acres. And then about 5 years ago, Teresa and Doug came to me and they said, we would like you to teach us about farming. Doug had an interest, and I didn't think Teresa ever, she didn't want to come out and work at all. But she wanted to read books and stuff like that, which is, I didn't discourage. And anyway, during those years, those last 5 years, they've kind of taken over. I've had some sickness issues now, and Doug does a real good job of running the farm. That's kind of his thing, and Teresa helps him with the management, the financial management and all that, and Teresa's running the plant now. We did start the plant, what would it be? 5 years ago, not quite 5 years ago, about 4.5 right now. We've set up a new plant at the same facility because Jim Saddleberg, the guy that bought the plant the first time, he moved over to Munger, and we had no cleaning facilities here. So we decided to rebuild the plant and do it here, which we're doing right now. And Teresa's doing a wonderful job of doing it management-wise and all of that. I can work out once in a while, bug them a little bit. But anyway, I helped Doug a little bit, do a little tractor driving and a little cultivation, and we talk about a lot of things about how we can improve our farm. My wife became National Committee woman. What would that be? 4.5 years ago right now, she became National Committee woman for the Republican Party, and we've traveled all over the United States. In fact, she got a chance to go to Taiwan about a month and a half ago. She spent a week in Taiwan, and the Taiwanese government paid for it, and she got a chance to spend a week there, and she got a chance to meet the Prime Minister. She got the defense minister. She got a chance to meet all these high dignitaries, and they're really wanting our protection from the Chinese, because the Chinese would like to take them over in no time. But anyway, they're doing real well. She's got a chance to travel a lot. We've met President Trump and Vice President Pence quite a few times. She's the high politician, so she gets into the meetings like I don't get, but I don't want to be in it either. So when this started, how we I started out farming at 16, having my own farm, and then it worked its way through. And then when Kath and I get married, I added to the farm a little bit. I was teaching at the same time. Then it developed up to the middle 80s when I started looking at organics, and we started developing some markets that we could sell our commodities to at a much better price than the chemical. And that worked out really well. We developed the processing, so that worked really well as I continued to teach and with the 4 children. And then in 2001, as I said, I retired from teaching just to reemphasize it. And then my wife and I built this off-grid home here, and I really was in the intention of having my grandchildren understand that when you turn on the vacuum cleaner, it takes electricity. You only do it on a sunny day. You don't do it on a cloudy day because you don't have much power. And that's the way we should be, in my opinion. Most people in today's society should be thinking along those ways. When we've got power, free power, we better be utilizing it. When we don't have the free power, then let's let off on it a little bit. But anyway, we still live in our home. It'll be 18 years old this December, and it developed into a side business, and we've installed 100 solar systems. And for the future in farming, I would like to see us look at several things. Obviously, expanding the cleaning operation into new fields, new things. One of our customers requested that I grow some baby limas, and I've never seen baby limas grown before. I've seen the seed. So I went down to the local store, bought a bag of baby limas, and I put some in my garden this year, and that's how I experiment with the new things. So I think there's an expansion we can do on new things that we've not grown in this area before. And also on this property where we live, 186 acres, between Teresa and Doug and I, we own, and Kathy, I would say that there's some unique things on this. This used to be an old orchard, and we've got a lot of old apple trees on this, and they've always talked about possibly making some hard ciders, that type of thing. And we've also talked about, which is something we didn't realize till a year ago, we have a unique item growing here, and it's not a native of this country, actually. And it is a autumn olive, and it's a little bush and it grows these little red berries, and they're really, you bite into it, it's got a big seed in there, but the juice is quite sweet. I would think we'd be able to make a wine out of those, organic wines, organic apple cider, hard apple cider, those kinds of things also could be. The sky's the limit. Teresa's got some good ideas, Doug's got some great ideas. We need to also put our heads together and make a great future for them if that's what they want. And the grandchildren, if they want to come into this, that's also a thing we could do. That's it.